Hi, it's Andy here at Photech Video, and in today's video I wanted to explain as simply and as clearly as possible how the exposure triangle affects your images, so that you can go out there with your camera in full manual and practice, experiment, and have great fun with photography. So, what is the exposure triangle and why should I understand it? Well, once you understand the exposure triangle, you'll be able to shoot in full manual exposure mode on your camera confidently. And once you can do that, it will help you to understand how useful the Aperture Priority mode and the Shutter Speed Priority mode are on your camera. So the exposure triangle has been about for a long time now, and it's a quite simple concept. It's all about how aperture, shutter speed and ISO work together to control the brightness of your image. Think of it like a seesaw. If you change one setting, you'll likely need to change another to balance things out. Aperture controls depth of field, shutter speed freezes or blurs motion, and ISO affects how sensitive your camera is to light. However, before we can use the exposure triangle in a creative way, we need to obtain the correct exposure for our image. One easy way to do that is to set your camera to automatic exposure. Yes, I know the idea of this video is to demonstrate how to use manual mode and the exposure triangle, but once the camera has decided a correct exposure for us and we take a mental note of the ISO, shutter speed and aperture, we can then change our exposure mode to manual and put those same settings in. Once the exposure is correct, then we're going to be able to use our exposure triangle to change parameters and to be more creative and artistic. So let's look at aperture first. Before we can understand what the f-stop numbers mean on our lens or our camera and how they affect the image, we need to understand what a stop of light is. Imagine that your camera is like a bucket catching raindrops. Each stop is doubling or halving the size of the bucket. So one stop more light means twice the amount of raindrops in the bucket, and one stop less means half as much. It's a simple way to think about how much light your camera is capturing. You'll see a series of numbers preceded by an F, possibly on the lens barrel or in your camera, or possibly both. The lower the F number, like F 1.4, the wider the opening on your lens is, letting in more light to the sensor. And that gives you a shallow depth of field so that your subject is sharp, but your background and foreground may be out of focus or blurry. Higher F numbers like f16 and f22 mean a narrower opening on your lens, letting in less light to your sensor, but creating a much deeper depth of field, where a lot more of your scene will actually be in focus. Aperture is usually changed in camera. However, some lenses do also have aperture settings and an aperture ring on the lens barrel where you can change that aperture there. Now those F numbers or f-stop numbers can look confusing, but really they aren't. Once you have these values in your mind, then it would be easy to apply them to your photography. If we look at this diagram, we can see that every second number is double the number from 2 stops back. In our diagram, we can see the f-stop numbers for each stop between f1.4 and f16. The first stop of light in our diagram is from f1.4 to f2. The second stop of light is from f2 to f2.8. And there you can see that the f2.8 is double what our first stop was, which was 1.4. The third stop of light is from f2.8 to f4. And there we can see that f4 is double f2. So if we think of the double number as being 2 stops, then we will know how many stops we are talking about from one f-stop number to another. So in the case of our diagram, which goes from f1.4 to f16, this particular lens would be able to change aperture between 8 complete stops of light. One important thing to remember is that for each stop of light that you adjust on your lens or on your camera, you will either double or halve the amount of light which is going to enter your lens and hit your sensor, depending on whether you are opening or closing the aperture of the lens. So going from f4 to f5.6, which is one stop, halves the amount of light which is going to enter the lens. And so the opposite is also true, that going from f5.6 to f4 will double the amount of light which is going to enter your lens. To make things easier for you, most cameras offer third of a stop clicks on the dial. This means that for every 3 clicks that you open or close your aperture down, you'll be changing the aperture by 1 full stop. And on most cameras, this is also true for the ISO control and for the shutter speed control, these third of a stop clicks. Now, being able to change your aperture by a third of a stop instead of a full stop is extremely useful for 2 reasons. Firstly, because we don't always want to open or close our aperture by a full stop. And secondly, as I said before, we can just count those clicks once we know which control is our aperture and which direction to move the dial. All we need to do is count 1, 2, 3, and then we can change our shutter speed, for example, in the opposite direction, 1, 2, 3. Now, I mentioned depth of field related to aperture, so just as a side note, depth of field is also affected by the focal length of the lens. Longer focal lengths, like telephoto lenses, generally produce a shallower depth of field at the same f-stop compared to wider focal lengths. Another factor which has an effect on depth of field is the subject distance. The closer you are to your subject, the shallower the depth of field will be at the same f-stop and focal length. And another factor which affects our depth of field is the sensor size. Larger sensors like full-frame cameras generally produce shallower depth of field compared to smaller sensors like APS-C or Micro Four Thirds at the same f-stop, focal length, and distance to subject. And just one other observation is that depth of field is relative. The term shallow, moderate, and deep depth of field are descriptive and relative to each other within this f-stop range. What is considered shallow at f2 may be considered deep compared to f2. Okay, so that was aperture. Now it's time to take a look at shutter speed. Now, shutter speed also affects the amount of light which hits the sensor, but this time it isn't achieved by the lens, it's all done in camera. Shutter speed controls how long the camera sensor is exposed to light. Each stop on the shutter speed scale also doubles or halves the amount of light. So if you go from 1/60th of a second to 1/125th of a second, you are halving the amount of light which is going to hit your sensor. Shutter speed is measured in fractions of a second, like 1/1000th of a second for very fast speeds, or in whole seconds for longer exposures. Different shutter speeds affect the motion blur in the image. The actual amount of blur is relative to how fast the subject is moving relative to the camera. A slow-moving subject will show less blur at a given shutter speed than a fast-moving one. So now we've looked at aperture with our f-stops, which affect depth of field, and shutter speed, which affects motion blur in our image. Now let's take a look at ISO, which in my opinion is the easiest part of the exposure triangle. ISO controls your camera's sensitivity to light. Lower ISOs like 100 and 200 mean less sensitivity to light and cleaner images, which is great for bright situations. Higher ISOs like 3200 or 6400 boost the light sensitivity in your camera for low light conditions, but can make your images look grainy with what's called noise. It's all about finding the right balance for the lighting that you're working with. Larger sensor cameras and newer camera models generally handle higher ISOs with less noise. A full frame camera will typically perform significantly better at at high ISOs than a camera with a smaller sensor. Now, I mentioned that grainy noise can affect your image. However, usable ISO is subjective. What constitutes acceptable noise and grain in your image varies from person to person and depends on the context of your photograph. Experiment to understand your camera's noise performance at different ISOs and determine your personal tolerance. The same as you can vary your shutter speed and your aperture to increase the brightness of your image, you can do the same with ISO. ISO values also double. A typical base ISO value for a modern camera is 100. Again, most cameras allow you to increase or decrease by a third of a stop with each click. So the ISO stops go from 100 to 200, 200 to 400, 400 to 800, 800 to 1600, 1600 to 3200, 3200 to 6400, and so on. Not all cameras offer such high ISO values. Remember that aperture and shutter speed change the artistic characteristics of your image, whereas ISO only balances out the exposure triangle by making your camera more or less sensitive to light. Once you have a correct exposure, if you vary one of the three sides of the exposure triangle, you'll need to adjust for that change on one or both of the other sides of the triangle, depending on your artistic criteria to keep a correct exposure. But always remembering that changing your aperture and changing your shutter speed will change the artistic look of your image, whereas changing the ISO will just make it brighter or darker. Well, I hope that my explanation of the exposure triangle has been easy to follow. I know it's a lot to take in, but once those concepts are in your mind, it will help you enormously, and you'll feel motivated to pick up your camera, turn it to manual mode, and go off and practice, and experiment, and generally have fun with your photography. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. I always answer your comments, and interacting with my channel is a great way for me to know the kind of content that you would like me to create in future videos. If you liked this video and or found it interesting, please click on the like button and share it with any friends and family who also may like this type of content. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. Subscribing to a YouTube channel is completely free for you, and it helps the channel to grow. And while you're at it, please ring on that notification bell to be notified every time a new video drops on my channel. You'll find affiliate links to gear used in the making of this video in the description section down below. If you purchase something through one of my affiliate links, thank you for supporting the channel. The price to you will be the same, and I will receive a small commission, which will help me continue creating content for you here on my channel. Until the next time, this is Andy at Photech Video signing off. Take care and be safe.